Welcome to Supernormal M. Today's episode is focused on the afterlife. Let's take a look. I died for a few minutes, and now I'm convinced that there's something after death. This is an experience by a YOYO_77. I never believed in anything. Not in heaven, not in the soul, per se. Not even in the stories of people who said that they have seen the light, quote-unquote. I'm a psychologist. I always thought that consciousness was perhaps just a product of the brain. That was until my heart stopped. 3 years ago, I had a cardiorespiratory arrest. That was while I was sleeping. The next thing I remember was a deep silence. Not darkness, not emptiness. Silence. It was so dense that it felt alive, as if that silence were something. I suddenly had the sensation of having left my body, and I couldn't see it from the outside. It was more of an expansion. It's like I no longer had limits, no time, no space, but somehow I was still me. And there I felt it, a warm, familiar energy. I didn't see her, but I recognized her with complete certainty. She was my grandfather. Okay, a little bit confusing. Moving on. There were no words or images, or just this direct understanding. A kind of invisible hug that told me everything is fine. Then a sound appeared, low and constant, like a rising vibration, and around thousands of lights floating and beating, each one with a different identity. I knew without anyone explaining it to me that they were souls. When I was about to join them, I felt a pull, like a force that tore me from that place. A blow. I came back, and a paramedic was reviving me. My partner was crying. From that day, everything changed. I'm not trying to convince anyone, but what I experienced was more real than anything in this world. And since then, when I accompany people who are grieving or close to dying, I sometimes perceive that same vibration in the air. A deep calm, something impossible to describe. I don't know if it was the afterlife or just a state of consciousness that we still don't understand. But I know what I felt, and since then, I'm no longer afraid of death. I was clinically dead for a few minutes. I felt absolute calm. I recognized my grandfather without seeing him. I saw thousands of lights that looked like souls, and since I came back, I am sure that death is not the end. And then there's a myriad of comments misunderstanding the thing that they mistyped. I won't tread on that. On to the next story. In a bit of agreement here as well. Now this next post is actually sort of more of a question with a bunch of users' answers. But I'm interested in the topic, so I'm just going to kind of dive in here. The question being, can you tell me an experience that made you believe that there's an afterlife? Trigger warning, apparently. Trigger being death. Please don't make it up. My dog died maybe an hour ago in my arms. I was looking at her face all the time, and yet even though they said she was already dead, I couldn't tell the difference. Just that her body didn't move. have had experience about the afterlife myself. I almost died once, and I saw a woman, and she told me things I didn't know that I found out later were true. Won't go into details. And when I was little, I even used to see a light, like the day and night somebody close to us would die. What do they mean there? Oh, they used to see a light during, whether it be the day or the night. It would be a signal that somebody close to them would die. Gotcha. I even saw shadows until recent years. But then I had another near-death experience, and it was really, really scary. I started to fear that it's not real, and I couldn't tell the difference in her eyes if she was the same to me. Now I really need this. So in response to this, somebody named Senlekped wrote, I had a similar story. My dog died from mysterious illness. My dad buried her under a huge tree near our house, and one night I had a dream about her crawling to my lab, and she was crying. I felt a sadness from her as I tried to comfort her. And later on in the day, my dad told me that they chopped down the big tree and plowed the land to build houses there. It was like she came to say goodbye forever. On her last day, she kept following me around the house for no reason, like clingy. I had to leave the house in the afternoon that day, and I still remember the way she looked at me, like she was staring into my soul as I was leaving the house. It was like she knew it was her last day. And I'm an only child, and I grew up with pets as friends, and that's why I had strong bonds with them. Well, most of my friends are animals I don't even know, so I'm with you there. Let's see if there's anything else a little bit chunky. Right. Even_lifeguard 8464. They write, my roommate's dad passed away suddenly during lockdown in 2020. It was due to complications relating to a very routine and minor surgery he needed. Kept getting pushed out because of COVID prioritization, and I don't remember what it was exactly, but it was something that could and should have been easily fixed. Point being that he went too soon. So after staying with her boyfriend for a few days, my roommate went to her dad's house, began the process of handing his things. Packed up a few boxes of his personal items, and she dropped them off at her house and went back to her boyfriend's house to stay for the night. That night at 3 a.m., the phone alarm started going off, and I thought I'd let it ring and eventually it would stop. But it didn't. I didn't want to text or potentially wake up my roommate because obviously she's going through a lot. So I went into her office space, and I was just looking for what was ringing. I unfortunately had to open one of her boxes, her dad's things, and rifle through it before I finally found this phone, turned the alarm off. He had an unmarked alarm set for the only time of that day at 3 a.m. When she got home the next day, I told her about it and apologized for going through her stuff. She freaked out a little bit because she told me that she had woken up from a bad dream at 3 a.m. that night. So we talked about how weird the alarm was. Her and her dad were close, and she couldn't think of any reason why he would have an alarm set for that particular time. So we just kind of brushed it off as a weird coincidence, right? But things kept getting progressively weirder and somewhat scarier in our house, at least after that. Both of us, we began having really intense lucid nightmares. A lot of times we were in each other's dreams. We'd find out after talking about it the next morning. I had nightmares that her and I were running away from that house. I began seeing this scary lady in all of my nightmares. They were chasing us out of that house. And she had lots of nightmares. It was where her dad was telling us to get out of that same house. and her cats started acting weird and staring into weird corners of the house, and we found holes in doors that we'd never noticed before. They were two kickers that really seemed to start things setting off, so to speak. One, I got home late after work one night. Her car was in the driveway. All the lights upstairs were off where our bedrooms were, and all the lights downstairs were on. Thought my roommate might be asleep. I hung out downstairs for hours, making food and watching TV. Eventually, I heard footsteps upstairs. I figured she probably slept all day and was finally up, but the footsteps, they were primarily going between her room and the office space down the hallway. I was texting another friend and made a joke about how I would lose my fucking shit if my roommate walked in the front door right now. And then my roommate walks into the front door with her boyfriend, or rather through it. They'd walked to a nearby bar and had been home the whole time. So I do lose my shit, and, well, she freaks out, and we search the entire house and check all the windows and locks, and everything's closed. Nothing's awry. Secondly, on another night around 1 a.m., we're both upstairs and we hear a violent crash downstairs. We run out of our rooms, both of us acknowledge that we both heard it. All of our cats in the rooms are with us, so we grabbed quote-unquote weapons and went downstairs. We checked everything. All doors and windows are locked. The only thing out of place was one of my framed drawings that was up on the wall in the kitchen was on the floor in the middle of the living room. It was face down, unscathed, unbroken, totally fine. Strange things, it was so far from where it was hanging up there, and there's no way that it could have fallen or slid there, and my roommate is stressed and fed up, puts the drawing on the counter, and we go back to bed. The next morning, I tell her about the nightmare I had the night before, where her dad was telling me that we needed to swim across this black lake to escape the house. She freaks out and tells me that she had a nightmare that they were jumping on rocks over dark water, and that her dad was pointing for the way to go. After breakfast, her boyfriend finally wakes up, comes downstairs and tells us that he had this crazy dream where he killed us both. And we were both completely unraveling. It was 6 or 7 months straight of horrible nightmares and interrupted sleep. I started becoming unable to discern conversations, and I couldn't distinguish real life from my dreams. Both of us are just sort of hanging on to the comfort we felt in seeing her dad throughout it all. But we're both so terrified all the time. The last straw was when I fell asleep on the couch in the middle of the day. I woke up on the couch in this sleep paralysis and had a nightmare that this scary lady was pulling the blanket underneath me and I couldn't move. I hit the floor, and that's when I actually woke up in the same spot on the floor. I left the house, had an actual breakdown. I called for my grandma, which I never do. I was freaking out about the entire situation. I talked to her about the scary lady I keep seeing, and sort of coping, joking, and asked if she knows a lady, like, dressed in this blue nightgown. The lady I keep seeing in my nightmares. And it's her mom, whom I've never met, and she passed away before I was born. So, told my roommate about everything. We agreed that something is just wrong. We packed up everything in the house into moving boxes, and we lived in that house maybe 2 months before I finally found a new place to live and moved out immediately. And neither of us had a single problem or bad dream about any of the stuff ever going on once we got out of that place. We lived together maybe another 1.5 years in this new house before I eventually moved from the city altogether. TLDR, don't tell me what to do. I never believed in anything paranormal or ghostly or otherworldly until my roommate's dad died suddenly. She brought us things back to our house, and this experience shook both of us to our core, and I can't explain away the fact that both of us were experiencing it at the same time. I genuinely feel like her dad was protecting us from something bad happening, or something bad that had happened in that house. Whenever I saw him in my dreams, I felt safer. Both of us really had our worldview changed after that. Terrifying ways, I now strongly believe that bad energy can't be physically left behind in a place, whether it's from a bad individual or a trauma or a tragedy that took place there. But in hopeful ways, I also believe that good energy can be left behind in a place or objects, and can be protective or helpful or comforting. I don't really know, but I try to embrace the idea that the ones we love are still there, just at a distance, in the same place, but another plane of existence. I hope so. Lastly, on this particular topic, well, I might be lying, we'll find out. At least I'm not stealing. Well, I guess I even sort of am, because I didn't ask permission, but I will say thank you a whole bunch. We'll see how that works. Anyhow, I have an extremely vivid dream that sort of connects me to the afterlife. I lost my dad in 2018. He had problems with arm pain, and at least right before he passed away. And the arm pain itself is completely unrelated to how he died. He died from a random heart attack. That's actually related, but never mind. He was my absolute best friend, and we were close, and 3 days after he passed away, I had a dream. He was at my front door, and he said, "Look, I'm all better now." Held up his arm and waved it around, and the dream continued. In one dream, I approached him, and he's sitting down in a metal chair outside, and I hugged him. He told me that whenever I find bits of money, in quotes, that it's him visiting me. Sure did find bits of money in the oddest places. In a shoe that I was wearing. Found it at the end of a workday, never felt it. $20 bill folded up like he used to fold them. It wasn't there before he had, well, passed away. Cash in a jacket I wore when we just were late eating lunch out together, and I know I didn't have this cash because I paid that day and I used a card. And about my dog, I had my best girl for 10 years exactly, to the day, approximately 16 years old. And I had a dream where she walked into my living room. I know she was no longer living, and there was another person in my dream who said, "Just hold her." Through the dream, I got to hold my little girl dog again. I woke up knowing I had just held her, and I could feel her fur, and I knew she came to visit me. I believe in the afterlife 100%. A little bit sad once you bring dogs in it for me. Actually, I'm going to do 2 more on this subject because it's a little bit juicy. Warning, more animal stuff. Can't help myself. About 10 years ago or so, I had a cat called Oscar. He was a little cute bobcat, so no nail. Just a little hubby tuft of fur. Tail. Gotcha. Bobcat. Shh. Ouch. He's a good cat, though. He developed an aggressive cancer, and it quickly took him away within 2 weeks of seeing the first signs of something that wasn't really being right with him. I took him to the vet, and they gave me the bad news, and I was heartbroken. It was Friday. I left him with the vets, and he was just too sick. They could at least provide him with some medicine and comfort, but the next morning they told me that he had passed away during the night. I bawled. I went and collected him and brought him home and buried him in the backyard. I've only cried hard like that maybe 2 or 3 times in my entire life. It hurt so much, and I was so fairly lonely at that time too, so Didn't have anyone around to talk about it with. I dealt with it alone. That Sunday, I'm standing in my doorway. I'm looking up at the sky. Still just devastated, but not crying. I had to go back to work in the morning. I pleaded to the sky in my mind to just give me a sign that he's out there, somewhere. Just show me something. So before I start the next part, I gotta add some context. Not long before all of this, I had to replace my smartphone. The screen had cracked. It was time to get a new one anyway. Couldn't use the phone because of the cracked screen, so I just let it go flat and started using my new phone. Little Osko would always sleep in the bed with me. Without fail, he would always wake me up a good 10 minutes before the alarm went off for work. 3:50 a.m., like clockwork. Now fast forward back to the present day of the story. Then Oska has passed, and it's Sunday, and I have work in the morning. I'm still just beside myself. I looked up at the sky, and I pleaded for a sign that he was okay, that he was out there somewhere. The next morning, my dead phone with the cracked screen that had gone flat weeks prior suddenly turned back on, and the alarm started going off at 3:50. I took that for the sign that it was. And yeah, this is a true story. I know the pain of losing an animal companion, and I wouldn't make something like that up for the heck of it. Sorry for your loss. Last one. Written by a lesser healing wave. I've had somebody tell me that they were able to communicate with loved ones from the other side, and so I did what every normal, rational person would do and said, "Okay, prove it." She then started talking to me about my early life and some very personal stories the deceased person had shared with me, and well, I was like, okay, this is sufficient proof to me. Like I know what cold reading is. I know the tricks that fake psychics use to manipulate people into giving away the information, and how they use vague information to have people fill in the blanks. This person was not doing any of that. I was staying quiet and still the whole time. Try not to give away anything, but all she needed to do was ask me a few questions to verify information. Like if my grandmother on my mom's side had passed, and I said, well, yeah. To which she then continued talking about how that person had been watching over my mother who'd been dealing with a specific illness, and what we could be doing to help her. Everything she was saying was spot on, and I absolutely believe in the afterlife now. If we die, there's nothing. There would be no possibility, or at least no way a person could be communicating still. Unless there's something out there. I have a very funny story connecting to this. Well, it's not really funny, it's horrifying, but maybe I'll plug that at the end or something. I know the afterlife as a subject isn't exactly paranormal. I guess that could be argued, but I'm going to go down one more little rabbit hole here. Question asked by Eskimo Joe Schmo. Question being, do you have enough proof for yourself that there's an afterlife, and if so, what caused it? So, for one thing, Upgrade Wife wrote about 11 years ago now, actually. This is a bit of an old one. I have a few memories of two past lives. For one thing, I've been visited multiple times throughout childhood and early childhood by my paternal grandmother. She died before I was born, and I never saw a picture of her until I was in my 30s. Dad had very few photos of her and kept them locked away to keep them protected. In high school, I finally told my mom I was concerned about being visited by this old woman. Well, I thought maybe I was crazy, or maybe I imagined her. And after describing the woman, my mom asked several clarifying questions. How did the visits make me feel, and did she give any reason for the visits? What was her physical appearance, and what did her clothes look like, things like that. Based upon my answers, she decided that it was my dad's mom. And another, my maternal grandfather, visited me a few times after he died. Once to deliver a message for me to give my mom, and I didn't understand the message at the time, but I did after she died a few years later. And finally, my mom has dropped in a couple of times since her death. Once to tell me something about a life-changing decision I was trying to make all the time, or rather I was trying to make a life-changing decision at the time. It made no sense to me at all, but when I told my aunt, her sister, they were very close, by the way, she told me what it meant to her, and they thought a lot alike, actually. They explained what my mom probably intended, and can all of these things be rationalized or explained away? Well, some of it, most certainly, but not all of it. And really, if you're determined to do so, you can find rational explanations for anything. But likewise, if you choose to believe things without much evidence, you sure can, and ultimately, I know what I've experienced. I continue to search for answers myself, and I'm not absolutely sure of anything, but I believe, and I'm an open-minded skeptic. Oh boy, somebody's asking about their past lives, and I gotta know for some reason. Maybe because their name is Upgrade Wife, which is already interesting. What exactly does that mean? A noun or verb? Well, I guess so. Though I imagine most people will attribute my memories to an overactive imagination. Personally, I think that if they were, well, there'd be a lot fewer holes in my recollection, and it'd be much more interesting. However, as I cannot substantiate a single bit of it, you'll have to draw your own conclusions here. Here's the life I remember. Japan, unknown time period, at least 300 years ago, maybe longer. I'm a young woman in a fine house. I'm living with a family of some standing. I do not perform hard labor, but for some reason I don't think I'm a daughter, maybe illegitimate, maybe orphan, niece, or cousin. I do spend time with the master of the household's daughter, though, and she's a few years older than I am. And this has not always been my home, but I don't remember where I lived before there. I have my own room, and I sleep alone on a padded mat, which is, well, not tremendously comfy. Much better than the floor or straw. My room is not adorned. It's a Spartan and utilitarian type, though strangely spacious. When I open the windows, there's almost always a breeze and smells of blossoms for months. Most of the year. I hear these bird songs. I have 3 oil lamps as well, and dishes, I think. That's what I used to read sometimes. I don't have a huge wardrobe, but each piece I have is of very fine quality and quite lovely. I'm allowed to walk or read in the garden whenever I like, as long as no member of the family is already using it, unless I'm specifically invited. The head gardener disapproves of my presence in his garden, as he puts it. Quick to run to the master with any perceived slight. His complaints are usually ignored, though. I'm occasionally punished, but not severely. I have no memory of being a concubine or having ever even had a lover. I'm always anxious. I've no rights, no social standing, and I'm not a slave, though. But I may as well, like my future is entirely up to the men in this house. And they're not kind, though not specifically cruel to me. They harbor no affection for me either, and I have a constant feeling of impending doom, like waiting for the sword to fall. That's pretty much it. First off, I've slept on those mats, and they're actually pretty comfortable, actually. That doesn't discredit your story, I'm just saying. You might think it's silly, but here it goes, says Awesome E. Can keep it short and sweet. There's a few things, but most recently I was involved in an accident and I fell onto tracks and then run over by a train. Whoa. settle down. I sustained many serious injuries and almost died. I had to get lots and lots of blood. I was losing it so fast, and I don't remember a lot from that night, but I do remember really bright, flashing lights. And by some miracle, I had no serious damage to my spine, neck, head, face, or brain. I was very lucky. Yes. I was put in medical-induced coma. When I woke up, I realized that the accident happened maybe at midnight. It was the day and time my dad died a few years ago. And I believe, and other people too, that my dad was looking out for me that day. Ouch. Following that, I slipped and fell on some ice, and I fell off a walkway into a parking lot. When I landed, the force threw my upper body back, and the back of my head hit the edge of a 4-inch raised walkway. Just before my head hit, I felt huge hands on my back and head. They were cupping my head so I didn't hit with as much force. When I finally came to, I asked my mom and those around me who caught my head, and they thought I was delusional. Well, that's pretty awesome. Lastly, deleted my very favorite user. Said I was going to sessions with a therapist, a shamanic therapist who was bullying me and interfering with me and my energy and my space in more nefarious ways. It had been going on for a few sessions, and I just sort of took it. I don't even know why. But she was seriously messing around with bad energies. The day it happened, I just got, not of my own volition, but went out of the door. I have no idea how it would have looked to someone observing it, but I definitely felt like the energy exerting the motion was on either side of me maybe, and then ahead of me as I went out the door. It definitely was guardians. I do have a history of being really dense and stupid in ways like this. Getting the correct impression and or messages, but not acting on them. That's what I'm working on right now. And yeah, it felt it saved me from like a horrible fate, and it kept me from having more of my energy siphoned. Kept me from having more insinuating kinds of things said to me, and thus taking root in me. I honestly think this person wanted my energy. Edited and add, no, I never went back, but I knew it really wasn't over after a long shot. That weekend, sat in my apartment sorting out what happened. I knew she was going to try to call me when the phone rang, and automatically, like a complete idiot, picked up her phone. Called me to listen to her. She told me in a very smooth, cold, and insinuating voice that in her professional opinion that I was mad and mentally ill and a schizophrenic, likely to do damage to others and all kinds of things in that vein. I just listened, and when she paused in the middle of a thought, I just said, I don't think so. Hung up the phone. She continued to call because coming out on top in any energy exchange is what some kind of shamans are really all about. Keep that kind of tally and scoring off of other people's plays and roll in that. So, question being, has anyone ever made a pact with a friend or relative to contact the other one after they passed to quote-unquote prove whether or not an afterlife or ghosts actually exist? And I was just curious because I jokingly and somewhat seriously made these pacts with my friends. Like, if you die before I do, give me a sign that you can see me or that you're near me. Has anyone ever done this with somebody else and had said person pass on and actually get a sign that they were still around or could contact you from the beyond? That guy thou says, true story in relation to this. My auntie is a constant visitor to our local spiritualist church. They often have mediums visit from all over the UK. Back in 2012, he, ex-husband, and they were still friends and had children, was diagnosed with cancer and was gave 3 to 6 months. He never believed in God, heaven, or spirits, and had no desire for a priest to preside over his funeral. And he actually requested his eldest son preside instead. Well, one evening, we're all watching television when he blurted out to my aunt, "If there's a way for me to visit, well, you'll know." And we all stared. "You'll know it's me, I promise. If there's a way, I'll find it." We all had a little laugh and brushed it off as nerves of a dying man. 2 months later, after we buried him, we mourned and got on with our lives. And then in early 2014, my aunt was off to her weekly visit to the spiritualist church. It's with my father, her brother. They had an Irish medium who came over a couple of days prior to do some talks and sessions. So everything was going normal until he approached my aunt stating there was a gentleman asking to speak with her. My aunt nodded to receive the message. That medium began talking to her ex and mentioned how she still has his leather biker jacket. It's hung in the hallway, which is 100% accurate. But then came the cake. Cake. "I told you I would find it blue." My aunt broke into tears. She thanked the medium and excused herself from the circle. Turns out, then they were both very young, her ex used to call her Blue. It was a pet name that he gave her, but not called her it in over 25 years. They were married and divorced, a childhood nickname only they knew about. It cemented her belief in the afterlife. Edit, sorry for any errors typed out on the cell phone. Apology accepted. A spiritualist church. Never heard of that. Bareface 93. He says, "I haven't made a pact with anyone, but I have been contacted. My cousin was murdered 3 years ago last month." Oh no, there's notification sounds yelling at me. The man who killed him was acquitted of all charges and claimed self-defense despite shooting my cousin in the back, so there was a whole shit show because of that. And the night of the verdict, I was lying in bed and felt someone stroking my arm. I talked as if it was to my cousin, and the strokes corresponded with my questions. Talked to him for a few minutes before saying I knew it was him and that he was all right, and the stroke stopped immediately. My grandma, a devout Catholic who's pretty adamant that ghosts don't exist, died a couple of days ago. My mom called me a couple of hours before I went to bed to say that she had died that morning. When I went to bed, I smelled my grandmother's very distinct smell out of nowhere for about 5 to 10 minutes before it faded. And her funeral is this coming Wednesday. I'm gonna be a pallbearer, so maybe there'll be something else from her. And also, both of my parents saw their grandmothers when they died. My mom woke up in the middle of the night to see her grandmother lying in the bed next to her. My mom used to sleep in her bed when she was little and couldn't sleep, as opposed to most kids who sleep with their parents in that situation. Coincidentally, she was my first paranormal experience as well. About a year after she died, and I was about 6, I slept with my door open a bit. And for about a month, I saw this white mist floating in and out of my door. One night, the mist took the form of a woman's silhouette, and I knew it to be her. Never saw her again after that. My dad said when he was in the Air Force, he woke up in the middle of the night to see his grandmother sitting on his bed. Talked to her for a bit, and she said, "Everything will be all right, I love you." That was before she disappeared. Got a call next morning from his mother saying that she had died in her sleep the previous night. Jokingly told some of my friends I'm going to haunt them when I die. Damn it, I'll do just that. I definitely told several people that if they see somebody recording a TikTok video and their mascara starts running at a high speed, that's me. So, I was really young when this happened. I think I was 7, or just ridiculously young. I don't know if my parents couldn't find a sitter, or they just figured I'd be fine, or, hey, maybe they decided it was time. Time I learned about these things, but, well, they decided to take me to a funeral. A relative of their friend, I think. I really don't remember the specifics, but it was someone I'd never met before. Anyway, being young and never seeing death before wasn't real any more than anything else on TV or in stories. But when I saw that lady in the coffin, the one not moving, and even though I didn't know her, I had such an overwhelming sadness. It was like nothing I'd ever felt before. This poor lady had died and she was gone forever. Her family could never see her again. I was also sad. I didn't stop crying, and it was like going and going for at least half an hour or more, and I just couldn't stop. This lady I didn't know, but my parents did. They asked me if I wanted to go for a walk. We did. She talked to me, asking me questions about myself and such, and after a while I was finally able to pull my little child self. Tried to pull myself together. After we had left, I had a feeling in me that didn't go away. Death was now real. And someday I would die. There was nothing I could do to stop it. I had a timer on me I couldn't see. When I reached the end, I would die. I could never see my family or friends ever again. That deeply disturbed me. I didn't forget about it. I kind of obsessed over it for a while, and it really disturbed me, and I didn't have an answer. Family, they tried to comfort me by talking about heaven, but it didn't help because I didn't really know for sure if it was real. And of course, my father got angry because questioning gods is a sin or something. I saw a thing on TV about ghosts, and how that they're spirits of people who live after death. Really heartwarming stories where relatives visit loved ones so they know that they're okay. Life after death, I didn't know if it was real. I mean, when you're a kid, adults tell you a lot of lies. Santa Claus, Easter Bunny, Boogeyman. After you figure out a few, you stop believing things just because adults tell you it's so. But if life after death was real, then it isn't such a horrifying thought, really, that one day nothingness would just come for me. Even though I would have to die someday, and I'd get to see my family again, it wouldn't be sad. So I asked my grandma. I didn't want to ask her. I loved her, and I didn't want her to die, but, well, she was a lot older than me, so you'd think that she'd go first. I mean, I was a child, and she was a grandma, so she wasn't really upset with me. She promised she'd visit me after she died. So that way I'd know life after death was real, and I wouldn't have to be afraid anymore. And she loved me very much. I believe I was 17 when she died. I'm no good with dates, but I was driving around at that point. I hadn't moved out, so I was probably around 17. My grandma had dementia the last few years of her life, and it was horrible seeing somebody you loved so much hallucinating and struggling to breathe. She had a loud machine that they hooked like air tubes to, and she wore that over her nose so she could breathe. And she had to use a nebulizer several times a day during the last year that she didn't even know who we were, and she would ask where I was, and she thought I was 6 years old. Didn't recognize adult me. Didn't recognize her son. Didn't recognize her husband. She'd get so confused and cry a lot, and it was awful. And eventually, it was her emphysema that killed her. Awful. And I have a lot of guilt. I wanted her to die. I wanted her to die. I saw her suffering and struggling to breathe and in pain and unable to get up on her own or do anything anymore. I wanted her to die so she wouldn't suffer anymore. I'm a terrible person for wishing this, because what I really want is her back healthy again, but I can't have that. For many months, I was into deep depression. My grandmother and I were very close. She was the encouraging life force in my life. Nothing was too small, and everything I did was amazing. I didn't think I realized until she was gone how little the rest of my family actually gave a shit about me. My one support was gone, and I was totally unprepared for it. I'll never forgot the promise she made to me, but we only talked about it once all those years ago. Promise to a little 7-year-old, and she maybe remembered. I don't know. Well, of course she didn't. I mean, it's too long ago. How could she remember? When she died, she couldn't even remember who I was, let alone a promise made 11 years ago. Still, I wondered and I hoped. Maybe when she died, there was somebody helping her wherever she went. Maybe she'd get better and get her memories back. That's stupid, maybe, so, well, I waited nervously. 2 months went by and there was nothing. Eventually, I forgot. 3 months from the day she died, I'm sitting at the family computer in the living room late at night. It was still dial-up at the time, and behind me I heard the familiar sound of her breathing machine fading in. I'd clicked a link, and it was pretty slow to load, so just a black screen had come up, and reflected in the screen, I could see the chair behind me. My dead grandmother was sitting in it. I was terrified. I don't know what other people in that situation would have done, maybe scream. Oh, and I sort of froze up, tried to act like I didn't see anything so the ghost wouldn't scare me. The screen loaded and I couldn't see the reflection anymore. I started shutting down the computer, and my dad was incredibly anal about leaving the computer on. Had a hell of a lecture the next day if I didn't. No, I certainly wasn't coming back to that room once I'd gotten out of it. Finally shut down. Didn't want to look behind me because I don't know what to do if I saw her sitting in that chair. But I had to leave. I turned around and the chair looked as always. But the noise of her thing that had just happened continued. I walked over to the stairs and went up them to get away from that scary thing. Behind me, I heard footsteps, and they started following me up the stairs. I couldn't escape it. It was going to follow me into my room. I was mortified, like a cornered mouse by a cat. But I remembered the promise. She must have thought I couldn't see her and was desperately trying to visit me to get my attention. So I turned around and I told her that she was scaring me. "Thank you for visiting me. I saw you. But I was afraid, so please don't follow me." The footsteps stopped, and the sound of her air compressor quickly faded. I don't know why I heard her breathing machine. The physical machine wasn't in the computer room. It was in her house, where her husband still lived. It still worked fine, I'm sure. I guess like asking why ghosts have clothes. My guess is because that's how she saw herself. It doesn't entirely make sense. I mean, before then there was kind of something after that made me feel better. Excuse me. I mean, before then I always believed there was a God in heaven. When you die, you're healed. She visited me, and knowing there was something after made me feel better. Experience did confuse me, though. If she was healed, why a machine? And she was like a good, giving, kind, wonderful woman. She believed in Jesus and God, so why would in the last year before her death she couldn't remember anything, yet somehow she remembered her promise to me and kept it? I think it's different for everyone. See, I've seen multiple pets after they've died, and they immediately look like they did at their most healthiest time in life. Like they did in their prime. They aren't scary, and they remember me and just look like they're full of joy and happiness. So that is comforting, though conflicting information is a bit confusing. Maybe people see themselves how they are when they died. But then instead of getting sicker and worse like we do, get old and die, I mean, dead people's self-image changes and gets healthier and healthier. Pets don't really have a self-image. They look healthy right after they die, maybe. I'm not sure, but that's what I'd guessed based on what I've seen. I have a lot of other experiences, but this is the one most relevant to your question. I will only correct one thing here. My dog has a massive self-image. He thinks he's about as big as my house. So somebody named Dirty Liberal Hippie writes that they have had a situation like this happen, and with their mom of all people. She approached me with the idea, actually. We both agreed that whoever goes first, if it's at all possible, that person will try to contact the other one. And if at all possible, by physical means, like something that would leave no doubt for the living one. And i.e., write a little message on a piece of paper. She did ask that if I were to die first, that I'd do something like appear at the foot of her bed in the middle of the night, because that would scare her, which is fair enough. We are both still living now, so I guess we just have to wait and see. I have had somebody in my family die a few months later come to me in a dream, and personally believe that that was them communicating with me. It felt real, and did in fact come off as a sort of communication to let me know, and to ask me to share with the rest of the family that she was fine and happy. It was more of a communication using visual images rather than speaking to each other, if that makes sense. But at the end of the day, I can't prove that it was anything other than a dream. I've heard stories before about Houdini having such a pact with his wife. Not sure if that's true or not, just another, you really think someone would do that? Just go on the internet and tell lies kind of thing. Good, because I was curious. Somebody else says Houdini did have a pact with his wife, that if they were finding it at all possible, that he'd communicate with her after his death. She held seances for years after his death, and every year on Halloween. Nothing ever came of it, though, which I find a bit sad and not at all comforting. Commercial Spirit writes, I'm unsure if anybody else has had an experience like this, but from a very young age I've romanticized dreams about the afterlife. Well, an entity in the afterlife. Earliest I remember it was probably around 7 or 8, but I had a dream that there was a ghost girl in my room. Me and her watched from my window as my childhood friends played outside without us. It was also a very somber mood in the whole thing. It was as though words weren't spoken, and I just knew that she wouldn't be there very long because she had to move away. I get similar dreams maybe twice a year, and while they differ, and I always have had the same ghost girl. Long black hair, everything else hidden in like this dark purple, almost black coat. Never seen skin color or the eye color or anything else, just hair. Dreams always seem to have a somber mood, though aside from the first initial dream, I can't recall if anything caused the mood. This also has led to me having nearly no fear of ghosts, and although I personally am a non-believer, I heavily romanticize the thought of human-ghost interaction because of it. As in, it makes me believe that if an incident happened, that would make me become a believer. I have no chance of being a negative interaction. A lot of people do not agree with that. I believe this is going to be the last story of the evening. This is by Crazy Tech Wizard 96. It's called I Was Her Guide to the Afterlife. This story isn't a creepy one, but a sad one, and even a bit disturbing for me. Okay, he was more or less fucked up and all that getting served on a plate on Christmas. Yeah, I guess a part of Christmas died for me on that day, too. This one is written a bit differently and probably has a bunch of errors in it, and you'll see toward the end why I'm just crying again. Alright, let me begin with some backstory of the night before, where some voice even told me over and over, it's going to be the nightmare before Christmas, it said, which made me even more kind of trying to make sense of it. This is my beloved dog, who wasn't too well for most of the year, but slowly recovered, had a really bad day. being sick to her stomach and all that. I knew from before that even started around the afternoon that something was around, and it's going to get really bad today. Towards the evening, she got sick to her stomach, and pretty much toward midnight, she was a mess. I've prayed to have it get better soon for her, and something told me that it'd be her last day. It was a long struggle, but then she fell asleep and was able to rest, breathing heavy still, and I comforted her a lot. To be honest, I won't go into a lot of details of what was going on, since it wasn't pleasant at all to witness. It makes me already tear up typing this down. I went to bed a bit later, and I was crying, and I prayed that she'd just wake up tomorrow and be fine. Yet, when I was asleep, I had a very strange and very lucid dream. Pretty much one of those lucid to astral dreams. I'm not sure how I should start, since there was something else going on. I should probably start with this, so as I was sleeping, my mother was still up and worried about her dog. Checked on her. Then taking a smoke break and praying that if she can't get better, to make it so that way she can sleep and leave this world and go to a better place. When she came back around 2:45, she noticed that she was gone. Now I'm crying again as I continue typing. She passed away on the 24th of December, 2022, 2:45. My mother wrote down on a letter for me and placed it on the living room table. And now we're coming to the paranormal part of things, where it goes heartbreaking for me, yet I thank the one who let me carry out this duty. So in the dream, I just came back into the living room, seeing her laying on her bed, looking at me, and I smiled and said, "Come on, girl, get up." She gave me a confused look, since she wasn't able to a few months without, having somebody help her. So I said again, "Come on, you can walk again." Clapped with my hands and smiled. She then tried and slowly managed to stand up, looking at me with a smile. She walked around, a bit clumsy at it. Told her to calm down and watch her movement. It was just a beautiful sight to see her walk again. Then she got out into the hallway and almost slipped a bit, so I said, "Oh, please be careful. It takes a bit to get used to it again." A moment later, she turned around. She just looked at me with a smile, yet she'd changed. Her fur got a lot more of a metallic silver color in it. She looked maybe like she was around 4 or 5 again, yet older. In a more or less older in a spiritual way, like she was a very old soul. I just stood there for a moment, turned around, walked to the door, opened it, letting her walk into the garden. She started to run around and loved it. She was so happy, and yet I noticed something was off, and it wasn't day but night. I looked further and didn't recognize my garden anymore. It was different yet familiar. I looked around and further and over, and later I found out that I knew this garden well. It was one of my grandparents. After a bit, I just kind of walk over and kind of stopped there, and I woke up. Both of my grandparents who were living in that house passed away. My grandma back in 2008, the year my dog was born, and well, my mom always told me for years that she always saw my grandparents and all who passed so far. And they're all at that house on the porch when they're drinking tea and coffee and having a nice day together. The dog before Lassie was also there, and just a place for everybody to come back together. Well, back to the sad truth. I woke up and enjoyed this dream until I spotted that box on the porch with that blanket over it. My heart sank at that moment, and I could only reply with, "Oh no." Walked into the living room and started to read the note. Hit me like a freight train. I wish it was just a dream, but I was her guide over into the afterlife maybe, and thank the one who let me escort her there to a better place. I think this is pretty much all of it for this one. Finishing this rather sad piece, sobbing with tears running down my cheeks. At least I was able to say goodbye to her and know that she's safe. Gone but not forgotten, till the day we meet again. Same message to you guys. Good afternoon, good evening, and good night. Sweet dreams. See ya.